I boarded the plane feeling like I had finally earned this moment. After months of saving, planning, and dealing with non-stop work stress, this vacation was supposed to be my reset button. I had booked my window seat weeks in advance because I needed the peace. Being able to look out at the sky always calmed me. As I slid into my seat and set my backpack under the chair, I took a deep breath, letting the anticipation of my getaway replace the tension in my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I felt relaxed. That lasted, maybe 30 seconds. Because that's exactly when she appeared. A woman in her mid-50s stomped down the aisle like she owned the aircraft. Short blonde hair, bright floral blouse, oversized handbag, and an expression that told me she hadn't heard no in many years. She stopped beside my row, blocked the aisle, and sighed loud enough for people 3 rows back to turn. Then, with the tone of someone inconvenienced by the existence of others, she pointed at my seat and said, "You're in my spot. That's my window seat." No greeting, no smile, just entitlement, straight from takeoff. I blinked, thinking maybe I misheard her. I pulled out my boarding pass to double-check. Nope. Asterisk asterisk 12A asterisk asterisk, window. Booked, paid, confirmed. So I calmly told her, "This is my assigned seat." But instead of checking her own ticket, she launched into a dramatic performance worthy of an award. "I need the window seat," she declared. "I get motion sickness. And my travel agent messed up. But I'm sure you're kind enough to switch." Translation: I picked the cheaper middle seat and now I want yours. When I politely said no, her jaw dropped like I had insulted her ancestors. "Wow," she said loudly enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Some people have no empathy these days." Passengers peeked over seatbacks. A few rolled their eyes. She continued her speech, hand on her chest, acting like she was the victim of a humanitarian crisis instead of a simple seat assignment she chose herself. Meanwhile, she still refused to move out of the aisle, holding up boarding and creating an audience for her performance. I stayed calm, repeating that I booked the seat and wasn't moving. But Karen wasn't used to being denied. With an exaggerated huff, she spun around and raised her hand like she was flagging down emergency services. "Flight attendant," she called. "We have a problem here." And as the attendant walked toward us, I realized my peaceful vacation was starting with turbulence long before the plane even left the ground. The flight attendant approached with that practiced airline smile, the one that says I'm here to help but also I've dealt with enough nonsense for a lifetime. Karen immediately jumped in, cutting off any greeting. "This passenger," she said, jabbing a finger in my direction, "is refusing to move out of my window seat. I paid for that seat. I always sit by the window. I have medical needs." She piled on lie after lie without even blinking, painting herself as a helpless victim. The passengers around us exchanged glances, silently telling the truth she wouldn't. The attendant remained composed, though I saw the flicker of exhaustion in her eyes. She asked for both our boarding passes. Karen thrust hers forward like a winning lottery ticket. But when the attendant scanned it, her eyebrows lifted just slightly, professional but unmistakable. "Ma'am, your seat is 12B, the middle seat," she said gently. Then she scanned mine. "And this passenger is correctly seated in 12A. A couple of people nearby nodded as if they had been waiting for someone to say it out loud. But Karen wasn't done, not even close. Instead of accepting reality, Karen switched to Plan B, public humiliation. She whipped out her phone and pointed it at me like a weapon. "Everyone, look at this," she announced dramatically. "This young man thinks it's okay to take someone's seat and then play dumb. Unbelievable." She filmed from every angle possible, probably imagining this going viral as a heroic moment. Meanwhile, all she captured was her own entitlement on full display, along with my very tired face. The flight attendant calmly asked her to stop recording. Karen rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful, but she lowered the phone, barely. "I'm just documenting mistreatment," she muttered loud enough for the entire cabin. "Some people don't care if you're sick." She sniffed dramatically as if she might faint any moment. A passenger across the aisle leaned toward me and whispered, "She pulled the same thing last month. Different flight." I almost laughed. Karen wasn't new to this routine. She was a frequent flyer in creating chaos. Finally, the attendant repeated, politely but firmly, that I had the correct seat, and Karen needed to sit in her assigned spot so the rest of the passengers could board. Karen let out a theatrical sigh, the kind you'd expect from someone asked to sacrifice their firstborn. She squeezed into the middle seat with the stiffness of someone being lowered into a coffin. I looked out the window, hoping that once the plane took off, she would accept the defeat quietly. But something told me Karen wasn't used to losing, and she wasn't planning to start today. Takeoff was surprisingly smooth, but the atmosphere beside me wasn't. Karen sat stiffly in her middle seat, arms folded, lips pursed so tightly they practically disappeared. Every few minutes she'd let out a loud sigh, as if reminding everyone that she was the true victim of this tragedy. I kept my eyes on the window, determined to enjoy the view I had paid for. The clouds rolled beneath us like white mountains, and for a moment I forgot she existed, until turbulence reminded me. The seatbelt sign dinged back on as the plane hit a rough patch. Drinks were paused, people straightened up, and Karen seized the moment to make herself the center of attention again. She gripped the armrests like they were life rafts and groaned dramatically. "See? This is why I need the window seat," she proclaimed, loud enough for the entire row behind us to hear. "If I can't see outside, I get disoriented." I almost pointed out that she could lean forward half an inch and look through the window, but I valued my peace more than the argument. But then something unexpected happened, a moment that shifted the entire flight. The guy sitting in the aisle seat, a friendly-looking man in his late 20s, tapped my shoulder. "Hey," he whispered, leaning over the Karen-sized barrier between us, "my girlfriend's right behind us. Would you mind switching seats so I can sit with her?" He gestured to the woman, smiling hopefully from the row behind. Instantly, I understood the opportunity that had just landed in my lap. Aisle seat. More legroom. Easy exit. And best of all, a chance to give Karen exactly what she kept demanding, for me to leave the window. I glanced past Karen, who was still putting on her turbulence opera. She didn't notice anything. Not yet. I nodded. "Yeah, sure," I said quietly. The aisle passenger's face lit up with gratitude. We signaled the flight attendant, who approved the switch with a quick smile. I gathered my things, calm and unbothered, while Karen continued her dramatic breathing like she was powering the aircraft with oxygen alone. She didn't realize what was happening until I stood up, and even then, her brain connected the dots at the slowest possible speed. She looked back and forth between the empty window seat and her own middle seat, her mouth dropping open in slow motion. For the first time since boarding, she was speechless. And that silence was the sweetest sound of the entire journey. Karen's shock transformed into outrage so fast it was almost impressive. As I slid into the aisle seat, she leaned toward me with an expression halfway between confusion and betrayal. "Wait, what are you doing?" she demanded, eyes wide. "You said you wouldn't give up the window." Her voice came out in a harsh whisper, the kind meant to sound polite but carrying enough venom to stun a small animal. I shrugged. "I'm just switching with him so he can sit with his girlfriend," I said calmly. "You wanted me out of the window seat, right?" The look on her face said she suddenly regretted every word she'd spoken since stepping on board. The aisle passenger thanked me again and took his new window seat happily. Karen, however, found herself in a situation completely of her own making. Her plan hadn't just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. She was still stuck in the middle seat, but now the window she desperately wanted was even farther away, guarded by someone who actually appreciated it. She shifted in her seat, trying to peer past him, but he leaned back naturally, blocking her view without even noticing. The poetic justice could not have been more perfect if the universe had written the script. I settled comfortably into the aisle seat, enjoying the extra legroom and the easy access to stand whenever I wanted, luxuries Karen clearly hadn't anticipated gifting me. She glared at me like I had personally designed the aircraft to spite her. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. "I needed that window." Her voice quivered with frustration, but now she had no argument left. The flight attendant even passed by, offering a sympathetic smile my way and a very neutral, very professional nod to Karen. Even she seemed to understand the karmic beauty of the moment. A few passengers who had witnessed the earlier drama glanced over, some hiding smiles, others giving me discreet thumbs-ups. Karen, realizing she had completely lost the audience she once tried to rally, sank back into her seat with a defeated posture. But her humiliation wasn't finished yet. When turbulence returned lightly, she clung to the armrests again, and this time, the man in the window seat didn't move or try to reassure her. He simply watched the clouds and enjoyed the view she tried to steal. Her exaggerated performance had backfired too. Nobody had sympathy left to spare. By the time the cabin lights dimmed for quiet time, the message had settled clearly across her face. She had demanded a seat, stirred up drama, lied to the flight crew, filmed me without permission, and still ended up with the worst seat on the row. And the best part? I hadn't raised my voice, argued, or broken a single rule. I just let her entitlement undo itself. Karma didn't need assistance. It simply needed a little push. When the plane finally began its descent, the cabin lights brightened and people stretched, waking from naps or shaking off turbulence. Karen, however, looked like she had gone through a full emotional storm. Her hair was slightly frazzled, her floral blouse wrinkled, and the dramatic energy she carried earlier had drained into pure, simmering embarrassment. Every time the man in the window seat adjusted himself, she flinched as if reminded of her defeat. I simply sat back, relaxed in my roomy aisle seat, tapping through my vacation plans on my phone, more comfortable than I ever expected to be. As the wheels touched down and applause rippled through the cabin, something unexpected happened. Passengers around us began quietly acknowledging what they had witnessed. A woman from the row across leaned over and whispered, "Good job handling her. I would have lost my mind." A man behind us chuckled softly, saying, "You gave her exactly what she asked for." Even the aisle passenger, now reunited with his girlfriend, glanced back with a grateful nod. Karen heard every word, and each comment seemed to sink her deeper into her seat. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Karen practically launched herself upright, ready to escape the humiliation as quickly as possible. She grabbed her oversized handbag and stormed into the aisle without waiting her turn. The flight attendant gently reminded her to let the rows ahead of her exit first. Karen froze, forced to stand there awkwardly, still trapped by rules she originally tried to manipulate. Her face flushed red, and she muttered something that sounded like "unbelievable," but no one paid her any attention this time. The audience she sought earlier had moved on. As she marched off the plane, still grumbling to herself, I stepped into the aisle at a comfortable pace. The same flight attendant who dealt with her earlier gave me a small, knowing smile, the kind that said, "Thank you for not making my job harder." I nodded back. There was no victory lap, no need for a dramatic exit. Karen had already given me the win the moment she demanded the seat she never deserved. I simply walked off the plane feeling light, refreshed, and amused that my relaxing vacation had begun with such satisfying karma. Outside the gate, as Karen disappeared into the crowd like a defeated storm cloud, I took a deep breath and smiled. Not only had I kept my calm, kept my seat, and avoided unnecessary conflict, I'd gained a story that would outlast the flight, the turbulence, and the drama. A story that proved one golden truth: entitlement always crashes harder than any airplane ever could.